We are recording.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. This is Wendy Rose Williams with Gregg Kirk, and we're so glad that you're joining us. I am a past life adventure guide. I help people release energy that doesn't serve them anymore. Depression, anxiety, chronic pain, and stuck creativity are some of the big things that can get in our way to not be able to live the life that we hope for and want and intend. You can visit my website at wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'll turn it over to Gregg Kirk, who will introduce himself and introduce today's topic.
Yes, I'm Gregg Kirk. You can find me at greggkirk.com. That's spelled Greggkirk.com. I am an energy worker, light worker. I help patients physically with Lyme disease and other chronic illnesses through herbal treatments, but I also help a wide range of people, not chronic illness patients, but all kinds of different patients through energy work. And I do that through in-person sessions with tuning forks, but I also do that through remote sessions over the phone. Help people into remission from their issues and work on blockages that may span the person's lifetimes from other lifetimes as well. So greggkirk.com. I also run weekly online healing circles through Zoom, and we just did one earlier this morning. And you can check those out. Go to greggkirk.com and click on the event button, and you'll see how to sign up for those. They're only $20 a piece. So anyway, Wendy and I have put together kind of a special, fun, cool broadcast for you today. Something a little outside of the normal. It's kind of a blending of the woo-woo work. I was looking for a better word for that, but the the non-physical work that we do with physical promptings that we've gotten. In other words, through our work, through in Wendy's case, it was past life memories. In my case, it was information I have gotten, from beyond the veil through either during energy sessions or my own energy meditation practices. We've gotten information that has prompted us to travel. So that the topic for today's discussion is actually transformation travel. So let me get this going here. Just bear with me. We get our.
And our guides must have really wanted to present this topic, Gregg, because I've never had a PowerPoint come together so quickly and easily. And you added your slides in like the same exact day. And it was like, boom, we're ready to have this conversation.
Yeah.
It was fun.
It was. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good, fun presentation because of that. It just all slid together. So Wendy came up with this idea for the topic. And then I had already actually done a little bit of a presentation through, not through our Waking Up Spiritually group, but through something else I did earlier in the year. So it was a perfect meshing of great ideas and experiences that we've had. So what do we mean by transformational travel? It means physically traveling as a result of some promptings that we've gotten from a spiritual aspect. Some people in our group were asking, "What do you mean traveling, out of your body and things like that?" And this is not this time. we can talk about that in other sessions and usually in other broadcasts. That's the kind of thing that we talk about. But today it's a little more feet on the ground, but where the source of the travel ideas, the itinerary came from outside of us. So all of the three traveling experiences I'll relate today involved earth balancing procedures that I had actually had no experience of doing. A couple of friends of mine had done it. And what do I mean by that? So you've probably heard, or if you haven't, that the earth has like a chakra system, much like our bodies. Is a set of meridians and what are called ley lines, Leylines. So there's different areas of the earth that have intersections of energies. And in those areas of intersections, it's kind of like the way our chakras work, where things are different in that part of the world. In some cases, there are portals. In other cases, there are blocked energies where bad things happen. So there are parts of the earth where there are kind of negative portals and negative things going on. It's interesting to know that many of the churches, especially the more famous churches in our world, are on or near ley line points. And most of, at least in the United States, our nuclear reactors, believe it or not, are near ley lines, which is kind of scary. Anyway, I was directed through some details I'll go into here in just a minute to go and do these earth balancing sessions to more or less do, it's kind of, instead of doing session on a person, my patient was the earth. So in other words, I have people come to me when their energy centers are blocked, and we work on that through tuning forks or through laying on of hands or just moving of energy, either remote or actually in person, but where I'm not touching the person. And this is what I was directed to do for the earth. So I'll go into a little more details about that, but that kind of sets up exactly what all three of these travel situations were about. So the first one, the instigation of the first one happened, on April 19th, 2019. It was 4 days after the Notre Dame Cathedral burnt. So the Notre Dame Cathedral actually, a lot of it burnt almost to the ground. The main structure is still standing, but the roof and some other main areas of the cathedral burned very badly and very famously on April 15th. So I was doing, it was actually the first remote session for a particular patient. I didn't know much about her. And as the session started, as I do with remote healings, I do a protection ritual, and we do some breathing. And then the first thing I do is connect with the person's energy body. A lot of times I'll get a visual of what that person looks like, or a loose outline of that person, and I'll see maybe their chakras or some debris in their field or whatever. Instead, I didn't see this person's energy body. I saw more or less what that photo looks like over there on the right of the slide. I saw Notre Dame burning. And I thought, what is happening? And I apologized to the person. I said, I think Notre Dame is on my mind. I mean, I've been there before. I've had a past life there. We've talked about it in other broadcasts. I lived near there. I spent a lot of time there in this lifetime and other lifetimes, apparently. So was that on my mind? I mean, it didn't make me happy when I saw the newscasts of it in flames, but no, that's not what it was. So as it unfolded, it turns out, first thing that came up was this woman had a past life as Jacques de Molay. We'll go into
oh my goodness
more who he was later, but he was head of the Templars, the Knights of the Templars, which if you read any Dan Brown books, you'll know about him from the Da Vinci, and you'll know about not so much Jacques de Molay, but the Templars from the Da Vinci Code. They started off being the Pope's armed forces, and they went originally to protect people who were trying to go on pilgrimages down into the Holy Land, but they ended up starting the Crusades. And one of the things they did was they kind of pilfered and got all of these holy relics, and I think they sold a lot of them, but they generated all this money within the course of just a few years. And they are the ones responsible for really starting our banking system. The idea of interest, they invented. The interest, if somebody loans you money and then you have to pay it back with interest, that comes from the Templars. And the Templars became a very powerful force, more powerful than and more rich than the Vatican at one point. So Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Templars. Now, he was burnt in front of Notre Dame. So as this information was coming in, it was like, oh, okay, I'm seeing that Jacques de Molay was this woman's past life was burnt in front of Notre Dame. We worked through this, and then I had a major interaction with the Divine Mother came through. It became almost nothing about this person. This woman just came in because she had Lyme disease and was not feeling well, and it turned into this activation beyond anything. And when it was over, I said, I'm sorry, like this almost barely had anything to do with your physical, the reason you came to me. And she said, are you kidding? This is unbelievable what happened. So we did another session in July, and the same kind of thing happened. It was which shocked me, because I thought, well, at least this session it'll be more about her physical infirmities. No, it doubled down on this. In fact, the Divine Mother came in and said, kept showing me two areas. One was the Notre Dame Cathedral, but also there's a point just in the yard of the cathedral called Kilomètre Zéro, 0 point. So this is actually the point of a ley line. Like, this is one of the Earth's chakras, where originally this is where all distances were measured in Europe, from Kilomètre Zéro. And this area is very energetic. And all of a sudden I started getting this information, like, well, not only was 0 point was definitely an important area, but before Notre Dame, it had actually been a temple of Isis. So this was an Earth chakra point.
That's a big deal.
Yes, it was an Earth chakra point that was divine feminine. And then the patriarchy came in, tore down the temple of Isis, and erected the Notre Dame Cathedral, and then literally burned women and other people in front of it, just completely defiling the chakra point, the 0 point chakra point. So the information that I got was, it needs to be cleared. So, and we had done some of the clearing during the session, and that was when I got some of the information. So the clearing that happened was beyond anything I could ever make up. I mean, it started off, I saw all this energy whirling around the cathedral, Notre Dame Cathedral, and then this earth opening up, and then it actually becoming what looked like a vagina. I mean, that's when I realized, oh, this is like a sacred feminine chakra. And then that's when the information came in that, yeah, it had been a temple of Isis had been there, and just all this had been defiled. So I thought, all right, well, I'll do another remote clearing. And the information I got was, no, it needs to be done in person. So, just a quick, what was going on in my personal life at the time. We had a flood in our house. We weren't even living in our house at the time. It had been destroyed by a flood, and they had found asbestos in some of our HVAC system. We had to evacuate our house for 3 months. So this was during that time. And, here I am getting information like, you got to go to Paris. Well, that was not on any nearby agenda. And in fact, from a financial aspect, it sounded even more remote. So during this period of time, while we were living in the hotel, which was being paid for by insurance, my wife's brother recommended that we get signed up for a points program through the hotel chain that we were, that where we were staying, and we did. And when all was said and done, when we left after 3.5 months, I had so many points that the trip, I looked up a trip to Paris, and it was almost free.
From the points of staying in the hotel.
Mm-hmm. So it all just like fell into place. And in fact, I think it cost $500 total. Like, that's including round trip flight, 4-star hotel. And it was great. So I ended up going there with my daughter. So we went there, and this is what it looked like. Now, remember, Notre Dame had burnt. So I just told my daughter, I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Notre Dame and we're going to go. Obviously we're not going to be able to go into the cathedral because it's partially demolished, but we'll go in to the 0 point area that's not far away. And we brought some crystals and some tuning forks, and a friend of mine gave me some information on how to do this clearing. And I kept looking up like online, like, can you even get near it? You know, how far, what's the status right now of Notre Dame? Can you go near it, or is it fenced off, or is it under construction, or partially, or whatever? And I couldn't get a straight answer to save my life. And I didn't find out until we actually went there. And the answer was no, you couldn't. It was fenced off. Kilometer 0 was fenced off. And and there we stood. We had flown all the way out there, and we stood there on this cloudy day. And I thought, and I just said out loud, like, I wouldn't have come here if I would have known this. And then it's one of the few times where I didn't hear a voice, but it came through immediately, where the guides were like, and that's why we didn't let you know. So they were like, you don't have to be standing on this. If you see on the slide, there's that round thing. That's marks the actual point of where 0 point is. It's, like I said, a little bit in the yard. If you're looking straight on at Notre Dame Cathedral from the front door, it's off to the left a little bit. Anyway, I found it, and we ended up standing on outside where the fiberglass fence is, about 10 feet away from it, which is not bad. Problem is, there's hundreds of people walking by every day. So here I am standing out with my arms out and bringing tuning forks with crystals. And of course, my daughter was not into that at all. She thought we were being freaks, but so we did it a couple of times.
Your daughter's a teenager. Dads are embarrassing enough, and now
Exactly.
we're really going for it.
Right, exactly. So anyway, it was, we did it. Well, I'm going to relate another experience. I had actually done another earth clearing, like since, so back in July was when, I got the input of, you need to go to Paris, but I actually I did another earth clearing in November of this year. So we went here in December, first week of December. I'm going to tell you about what happened, but the same kind of thing happened here, where we physically did the clearing. So I stood there with crystals. One of the crystals was just a regular crystal that I use for clearing, or for energy clearing in a session. But the other, in my left hand, I held a stone that came from the earth that meant something to me. So it's a stone that I picked up where I was just walking along a stream, and all of a sudden this stone jumped out at me, like, what is that thing? And it was some petrified wood, actually. So I brought that upon the behest of my friend who's done these kind of clearings. He basically said, bring a highly charged crystal, and then a stone, it could be a shell or something very organic that you feel has something going on with it. And that's exactly what I did. So I have an angel tuner. I was doing that. And so we did this twice. Now, I also found out during this time that Jacques de Molay was actually not executed in front of the cathedral or near 0 point. And by the way, all of this is on an island called Île de la Cité, island of the city. So Notre Dame and all this area. And it kind of looks like maybe a teardrop shape. And if you imagine the teardrop shape being like a boat, where Jacques de Molay was executed was on the eastern shore of like the bow of the boat. And this is where it was. So we also did a clearing here. And so in the middle picture, you can see this island actually comes out to a point, very much like a bow to a boat. So we went there and we did the clearing there as well. And when we did, we found that I don't know if you can see it because the way that Zoom is showing our photographs or our personal images here, it might be blocking. There's a plaque that's in honor of Jacques de Molay. And the kind of the strange
I
thing
can see
that
the
happened.
plaque.
You can see it? Okay, good.
Yes.
So basically it says, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order of the Templars, he was burned on March 18th, 1314. So we did this clearing. There was nobody in this area, so my daughter Carly was okay with it. And then and where this is where there's a pont or a bridge, and we went to the base of the bridge to go up the steps to get out of this area, and this is where we saw the plaque of Jacques de Molay. There was two young girls there, and they were like they were praying, and we kind of scared them away when I walked over to look at the plaque. And if you look on the far left, they were paying homage to Jacques de Molay. They put down a white rose in honor of him, which was just strange timing that here we are doing this clearing, and then we go over to this plaque in honor of Jacques de Molay, and these two young girls, like in their early 20s, were paying homage to him as well. Anyway, the whole deal with Jacques de Molay was France was indebted to the Templars. Like I said, the Templars had become more powerful than the Vatican at that point in terms of financial strength. So King Philip IV of France owed so much money to the Templars that he decided, instead of paying them back, he'd just kill all the Templars, starting with Jacques de Molay. And he basically disbanded the Templars by saying that they were doing satanic rituals. Maybe they were, I don't know. It's kind of hard to find out the straight answer on that. But Jacques de Molay, he recanted. So originally, in order to save his own life, he said, yes, we were doing, evil rituals. And then on the day of his execution, he recanted. He said, no, we weren't doing that. And so they burned him here on the bow of this island, and on a scaffolding on March 18th, 1314. So this woman that I'd done the energy sessions on, we had to clear all that, because her past life came right out. That was Jacques de Molay. So we did this clearing 2 days, and then just something happened spontaneously. On the third day we were there, I was just doing my normal, I do a practice, so I'm doing my meditative practice every day. And during my practice there in Paris in the hotel room, I connected with this area. And I did more or less a remote clearing. And that was probably actually the most dramatic clearing of all, because I saw all of these things coming out, dark energies coming out that looked dragon-like, and just very large evil things that came out of this earth chakra that had been just blocked and cleared and defiled. And friends of mine do more or less, it's like earth kinesiology, so they can actually find points in the world, and you give them coordinates, and then they'll do a reading on it, and they can do before and after different points of time. Friends of mine did a connection with this. They found that I remember the exact numbers. So it's on a range from 0 to 100. 100 being perfectly, clear.
Harmonious.
Yeah, and then lower, down in the teens and so forth. This is really, really bad. And this was down to, I don't know, 15 or something. And then when it was cleared, it went up to like 95 or 97.
Oh my goodness! What a remarkable difference.
Yeah, it was a big clearing. So that was very rewarding. It was great to take my daughter to Paris, and we had some really wild synergies there. So, as I had mentioned before we actually went to Notre Dame, I had mentioned to my friends who do these earth readings about going to Paris. And believe me, I didn't tell very many people about, where we were going or why we were going, because I didn't want to be thwarted, for one thing. That's one of the things my friend who has done these kind of clearings has said. He said, don't tell anyone what you're doing, not because you're embarrassed or anything like that, but sometimes, the energy gets out and, negative forces can try to stop you. He said, just keep it to yourself. So we did. But I did tell my friends who I trust, and they had talked about a ley line that's actually near where we both live, called the Hammonasset line. It's a line that starts from Montauk, Long Island, goes all the way through Connecticut, and crosses over New York State, and it ends at a Buddhist temple in Overlook Mountain in Woodstock, New York. So according to my friend, there are two major Buddhist temples, high order Buddhist temples in the world. One is in the Himalayas, the other is in Woodstock, New York. This is where the ley line ends.
What a contrast.
Yeah. This is where the ley line ends, is at KTD, the Karma Triyana Dharma Chakra, that center. And I've actually been there several times. It's a place of very high energy. It's a place where I walked into the main sanctuary and I burst into tears. Like it's got such a beautiful energy to it. So the ley line starts on Montauk, Long Island, which has some wild things going on there. Just off the coast of Long Island is Plum Island, where they've done biowarfare testing and creation of things. There's a book called Lab 257 that's about a laboratory that's there on Plum Island, where they claim to have created Lyme disease and West Nile virus. And it's interesting book, but the point being is that's some low energy going on there. And then it goes all the way up to KTD in Woodstock. So he and I were talking about this, and when I told him all the negative stuff that's going on or near the Long Island area, he said, why don't we do like a practice clearing, or let's do a clearing before you go to Paris. So we did. So we took the ferry over and basically spent a day. So he and his wife and I went to there, and we found where the ley line starts. And that's in a crazy area too. It's called Council Rock. So the center slide, you see this giant piece of quartzite that's just sitting there. It's been sitting there for hundreds of years. Nothing's near it. And so Council Rock has been a meeting place for 13 Native American tribes in the region for hundreds of years. And according to accounts, the Montaukets were buried where they died in combat along the lower lands just east of Fort Hill. So Fort Hill is this area where Council Rock is. And they were in a battle with the Narragansett tribe. This area has been nicknamed Massacre Valley. So originally Council Rock started off as a meeting place for all these tribes, but then there was a battle there. A lot of people got killed, and that's probably when the energy started going south for this this area. Now, it's a beautiful area. It's on one of the forks of Long Island itself. If you look on the left, you can see for miles and miles. My friend actually told me, he said, you can always tell where the ley lines are. It's where the mountains meet the sea usually. And this is, you can see the mountains, that's the sea, actually inland. So my friend is really, excuse me, does a lot of sweat lodges and is very in tune with the Lakota Native American tribe. So we showed up, we found Council Rock, and I got 10 feet away from it and instantly felt a change in energy, and wind kicked up. Like as soon as I stepped, Council Rock is around this circle that's paved around it. And as soon as I stepped into the circle and started doing energy work, the wind was just blasting. And my friend then went up, and his wife went up on a hill you can see over on the right, and laid a tarp down and did a whole Native American ceremony of clearing, where he burned sage in an abalone shell. He was beating drums. They were doing rattles. They were singing chants and doing prayers. And after I finished with what I was doing, I went up and joined them. And as we were finishing up that ceremony, so this is in November, keep in mind, 2 honeybees came out of nowhere. We have no idea how that happened. And they were all in our face during the ceremony. And even with the sage burning, because I know that smoke can actually kind of knock bees out and make them groggy, but it was like they were attracted to the sage. And they were buzzing around us the entire time we were doing the prayers and the chants and everything. And then as soon as we finished, it was like a switch was turned off. The wind was gone. Everything was quiet and we were done. And anyway, it was just amazing. I'm adding this account to a book I'm writing. There's more details. Like at one point went up and I actually put my arms around the rock and hugged it. And I closed my eyes. I could see down. It was like looking down into a hole to the center of the earth. I saw all this stuff coming out as I was doing the clearing. So very cool stuff. So let me pause for a second, get a little drink. You have any comments at this point, Wendy? And let me just double check to see if we've got any.
I think it's just so amazing how we're guided to do certain things and how beautiful it is when you are willing to step out and trust. Because, not being able to figure out, am I going to be able to get to 0 point or not? I mean, that wasn't the point. It was just to make the effort to go there, and how easily that trip came together. That's a big signal to me that I am really meant to go somewhere when it comes together easily like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way it felt too with both of these things. So it was just the coincidences were one after another, and they all this happened it happened in November and then December, and then a third one happened. So the third one happened in late February of this year, 2020. And it happened right before all the lockdown stuff occurred. So again, perfect timing, because literally when my daughter and I came back from this one, the next week we all went into lockdown, and our lives changed drastically for 2020. So what was the third one? Hopefully you can see this over. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. If you look at the slide over on the right, I'm hoping you can see it. I was doing some
there's 3
research.
slides.
Yeah,
You can see the map.
Yes, so the map here, I'm pointing to this area. I was doing research on ley lines in the United States and nearby. And I kept seeing similar maps to this, where something was called a pyramidal grid node, which means it's more than a ley line. It's the intersection of multiple ley lines. And I kept seeing this point here. I'm like, that looks like the Bahamas or something. And I knew enough that, this is near the Bermuda Triangle, that Edgar Cayce had predicted, back in, I don't remember, what it was, late 1800s or early 1900s, that people would find evidence of Atlantis in the Bahamas area. So I just thought, this is weird. I keep seeing this pyramidal grid. So what is it? And the more I blew up the map, I found out it was, the grid was just on a certain part of one island and I've been to the Bahamas, Nassau and a couple of other islands nearby, but I'd never heard of this island called Andros Island. It's actually the biggest island in the Bahamas, and it's not very well populated. It's not really a tourist place. In fact, there's only a couple of hotels on it. It's mostly native, people, original Bahamians. And it's a very flat island and doesn't have any, it's not a sexy island. It's just got a bunch of trees, and then it's got some nice beaches, but it's very flat and not as scenic as some of the other islands, but it's immense, and it's got some strange areas on it. One of them being called the Andros Platform. So there is a square platform in 8 feet of water off the northeast coast of Andros Island that was clearly built by humans out of stone. What's it doing there? There were no ancient civilizations that anybody knew of in the Bahamas, right? But this goes in line with what Edgar Cayce was talking about. Anyway, the interesting part of the island is the island's kind of flat and, like I said, not extremely scenic, but it's got some amazing features to it. One, it's got blue holes. So there's obviously a lot of volcanic activity on the island, millions of years ago, and these blue holes were created, which is a certain situation that happens where like a bubble occurs, an immense one, hundreds of feet wide, that creates and then water fills it, and usually it's fresh water. And Jacques Cousteau did several episodes where his team came in and they found all the blue holes on Andros Island, and they dove in them, with their scuba gear, and found all these amazing things in it. And it's kind of a mixture of mainly fresh water on top, sometimes salt water's near the very bottom, but that kind of leaks through. Anyway, so there's a lot of blue holes, but also the very tip of this island is crazy energy. So my daughter and I went there. Because of the map, like one you're seeing here, that's what drove me to go to the tip of the island. Tip of the island has an area called Morgan's Bluff. So Captain Morgan, who's famous for, they named some rum after him. He was a real pirate. He lived on Andros Island for a while. And what he did on Morgan's Bluff is he would put lanterns on goats and let them walk around on the bluff here, which would trick boats into thinking that it was a lighthouse, and they would smash into the reef here. And then he would send his guys out, and they would pilfer the boats that wrecked. But the bluff itself is unbelievably, it's always the same. It's water smashing into it. No matter, you can go inland and it's a beautiful sunny day and birds chirping. You go to Morgan's Bluff, it's always windy, like knock you over type wind, and the waves are crashing, and it's freezing, and it's always like that there. When we went, we noticed that somebody put a cross up that's apparently been there for decades. Anyway, so my daughter and I, and this is, you can see it in the slides on the left and then in the middle. It's just very rough volcanic rock. We went there and we did a clearing there as well. And oh yeah, there's an area called the Tongue of the Ocean that lies just off the north coast. That is one of the deepest underwater trenches in the world. So really it makes Morgan's Bluff the peak of one of the tallest mountains in the world. So Morgan's Bluff, which is only probably 60 feet above the water, goes down like almost as deep as, so if there were no water, it'd be as tall as, almost as tall as one of the Himalayas. So this area felt physically highly charged energetically, but kind of crazy as well. So I did a couple of clearings there, and the same kind of thing happened to me that happened in Paris, where we did 2 sessions. Actually, I went here every day because this has now become one of my favorite places on earth. It's just an amazing place. But one of the days I was doing my daily practice, we were in our little house that we rented, and I did a remote connection with this area, and I saw this coming out. So wow. I saw a vortex spinning in the center, and then it was pulling things up, and I saw this giant dinosaur sea serpent thing come out of it. Anyway, so the energy changed. I contacted my friends who do the energy gauging, and they said a very similar thing. It wasn't quite as low as Notre Dame area, but it was like in the 60s, I think. And then it went up to like 98 after the clearing had been finished. Just another bit of interesting stuff that happened. So if you look on the slide over here on the left, we found visible footprints in the volcanic rock. This was just one of them. Like my foot fit perfectly in that spot. So how did that happen? So in order for this to have become a footprint, the rock must have been molten millions of years ago, and somebody walked on it. I mean, how else could that have appeared? This is just one of them. We found 2 or 3. The other thing is, the week that we got back, it was announced in the news that some orichalcum ingots had been found from a 2,600-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Sicily. Now, orichalcum is actually a metal that people didn't believe existed. Plato actually mentions it in, Plato talked about, and the reason we know about Atlantis is because of Plato. So he talked about it hundreds of years ago, and he mentioned that all of the buildings on Atlantis were covered in orichalcum, and they gave kind of a reddish golden glow when the sun set. So a lot of people think, oh, Plato was speaking, metaphorically, and this was just a myth, and it's a poetic thing. It's not real. Well, they found real orichalcum the week that we came back in Sicily, and it's like a 78% copper and 15% zinc, and some people think it's almost as valuable as gold, but pretty cool stuff. So, Wendy, do you have any?
Well, that's wonderful. I just love the stories of being guided to go to these different places, and that you made the effort, even though it may not have made sense to you exactly at the time. Why am I going? I mean, sometimes we know, and other times we really have to step out in faith, and just, our guides are saying you need to go to a certain location. So I've had some of both.
Good. I will move on to your set of slides.
All right. So Gregg, as he said, were channeled, and it was wonderful earth type clearings and energy. And mine were, yes, they were past life pilgrimages, meaning they related to my belief that I had lived somewhere before and had energy to release from it. But sometimes there was a portal opening or something else going on that had related to one of my own past lives. So let's look at the next slide, please. So the first past life pilgrimage that I went on, that I'm aware of, because sometimes we're aware that that's what we're doing or what we think we're exploring, and other times it's like surprise, and you get somewhere and you can suddenly just navigate the streets, or you're comparing it to how it used to be. But the first one I went on was a planned past life pilgrimage, and at first I didn't know what past life it had related to. But I saw a picture of Ramona Falls, Oregon, a waterfall on the left, which is just a stunning, gorgeous waterfall. It's a 7-mile hike. It's a loop. You go up one direction and down in another. And I was so drawn to it. And what was interesting was one of my friends also had seen the same thing. It was this like little article of 100 waterfalls you have to see before you die type of thing on Facebook. And we both said, oh my gosh, we've got to go to Ramona Falls. We're just so drawn to go there. And we live in the Seattle area, so we were able to do it as a weekend trip. And it came together so beautifully, so easily. She went and stayed with her daughter. I went and stayed with a friend. And then we did this trip to the waterfall. And as I said, I wasn't sure what past life it had related to for me. But a few days, so I kept meditating on it. I was trying to understand from my guides, why am I drawn to go there? Because I'll be honest, I was not in any shape to do a 7-mile hike. And I was like, I've never hiked 7 miles. I have all these interesting problems with my hips and foot surgeries and back problems. And yet you want me to go on a 7-mile hike. So it really was a leap of faith to do it. And my friend was in a similar situation. She had just had unplanned major surgery about 6 weeks before we went there. So she was, there just was no time to train. So it really was a bit of a leap of faith. But about 4 or 5 days before we went there, I finally heard from my guides, because I kept saying, I know you want me to go there. We're going to go. We've got the trip planned. Do you want me to know what life it pertains to? And they finally said, it's your wagon train past life, or you were a wagon train leader. So I knew I had been Jesse Applegate, who's pictured in the middle, and I knew that there's a lot of tough stuff that happened on those wagon train trips, because they were thousands of miles that people migrated, and we were not riding along in wagons or riding on horseback. These were not easy trips. We were on foot because we were leading the wagons and leading the horses, type of thing. And there were a lot of dangers. I mean, the main one was drowning. So there were just a lot of dangerous rivers that had to be forded, and disease also could come into play, because you're on this major trek for, potentially 3 to 4 months. So, different things could happen. So what happened was, once my guides told me that, I thought, oh my gosh, I need to look up, where did Jesse Applegate actually go? Can I find a map of that, like Gregg with his maps? Can I find a map of that? And I did find that it looked like he may have gone through the Ramona Falls area. So it's like, that's it. I really feel like it's that past life. But I didn't know, and I just felt so sad about that trip. I felt so sorry about it. I just could feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility, and like there had been some problems and some things I hadn't forgiven myself for. So that's the energy I was feeling. And I found this book on the right, A Day with the Cow Column, and it was about Jesse Applegate's life. He had a nephew who was named for him. So the author of it is Jesse Applegate, but it's his nephew, Jesse Applegate. So I was able to track down and find this book. There had only been like a couple hundred copies of it published at that time, but I was able to find a copy, and it came in the mail literally like 2 days before we leave on the trip. I don't have time to read it, so I just meditated, I prayed, I sat down with the book in my lap and asked my guides, what do you want me to know? Because there's a reason I was able to get this book. And I said, what do you want me to know? And they just said, open the book. So I just opened it, randomly to a page and read just that page. And what I was reading about was Jesse watching his own son and nephew drown on that voyage. So that was really tough to process. And I thought, that's it. That's the exact grief I'm feeling, is I just have not forgiven myself for this, because my wife in that lifetime also watched it. My brother watched his son, my sister-in-law watched their son. So we all witnessed this drowning and just could not do anything about it. It was on the mighty Columbia River, and that is quite a river to be, to have forded and gotten across. So that's what was going on leading up to the trip. And as we actually got there and hiked it, there were three of us, the friend that I stayed with and my girlfriend who had also been really drawn to go on it. And we had barely parked the car and started walking, and it was beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful hikes I've ever been on, just the woods, just everything. And my friend immediately started hearing Native American drums. And she's looking at both of us. She's like, do you hear those? And we said, no, we don't hear them, but we believe you. We know you hear them. And she was going back into one of her past lives. And she had published already the story about being a young Native American wife who was very much in love. She was married to the chief. They had 3 little children. And she had been down at the water, gathering water, and she wasn't in deep water, but what happened was a branch fell off and knocked her unconscious. Just this tree branch just fell, and she ends up being swept into the water and drowns. So what happened on the trip was, I actually saw her as Jesse Applegate. I saw her across the river from me and said, oh my gosh, look at that woman. I can't get to her. And so I witnessed another drowning. But it was just so interesting that the two of us were guided to go on this trip together. And it ended up being that, our two different lives had intersected for 60 seconds, but we both could really feel the energy. So it really was an incredible trip. I think it took us about 6 hours to do the hiking that day. And I just felt like weight was coming off my shoulders because I just was working on forgiving myself. So that's what that trip was about. And it just was it really was a big deal, because often we can forgive others more easily than we can forgive ourselves. And as I researched Jesse Applegate's life, he and one of his brothers had led this very large migration, and it was over 1,000 people had gone on it, and about 5% of the people had died. That was the weight I was feeling of, I was, paid to lead people and to do a good job and to keep them safe. So that was what I needed to release. So let's look at the next slide. So here is beautiful Multnomah Falls in Oregon. And this was an unplanned past life pilgrimage that happened in February of 2013. So my two daughters, who were then in high school, and my mom and I went down to Portland, Oregon, which is a 3-hour trip south of us from the Seattle area. And we did all these fun things in Portland for the weekend. And then we had a couple hours on Sunday before we went home. And my mom had done a little research, and she said, there's this, what's supposed to be a beautiful waterfall, and it's very close to the road. It doesn't involve a lot of hiking because my mom was older and mobility issues. And she said, I'll be able to get there. So can we do Multnomah Falls? And we said, sure, that sounds great. And from the minute we agreed to do that, I started hearing my guides, and they would just say Multnomah Falls, and they would say my oldest daughter's name, and they would say Princess. And I'm like, Multnomah Falls, Tara, Princess. Okay, I don't get it. I just don't get it. So we went there, enjoyed it, took a lot of photos, went inside the gift shop, and it has a nice gift shop. So we kind of split up in there, and I just could hear, like my friend had heard at Ramona Falls, I just could hear Native American drums all around me. And I knew I was the only one hearing them. And I kept hearing more and more urgently, my daughter's name and Princess, my daughter's name, Princess. So finally, of all the things that answers the question for me of what's going on, is it's a postcard. And it's a postcard with the legend of Multnomah Falls. And it explained what had happened to the tribal people, the Native American people that were there. And they had been there for centuries at this, beautiful, beautiful waterfall. And there were occasionally some traders, some travelers would come in, European ships would come in. So there'd been some contact of that type, but all of a sudden there was this terrible sickness that was going through the Native American tribe. They didn't know what it was. They brought the elders together. They brought the medicine man in. They brought the chiefs together and said, what do we do? Our people are dying. What is going on here? And, we don't know what this disease is. We can't cure it. It's not like something normal that we can, typically cure many of the people from. And the medicine man shared with them, he was very elderly, and he shared with them a story passed down through his family, that there would come a time when a chief's daughter, and chief's daughters at that time were called princesses, where only a chief's daughter could save them by sacrificing herself. And the chiefs they gathered together, and they had 7 or 8 young girls. They were primarily young girls. And they said, no, we're not going to ask any of our daughters to make that sacrifice. If the tribe is going to die out, then that's what's meant to happen, and the tribe's going to die out. And Multnomah was the daughter of one of the chiefs, and she had accepted the decision that her father and the other elders had made until her fiance, who she loved very much, also became ill. And she was so concerned that he was going to be taken from her that she went in the dark of night, and she hiked up to the top of Multnomah Falls, and she asked her guides if she was meant to take that step and to step off the falls. Would they please give her a sign? And this beautiful moon came up right at that point, so she threw herself off the falls. And the sickness was gone by the next morning. So that's the legend. It's an interesting legend, because it's not a tribe that normally has self-sacrifice like that in it. And what my guide showed me was my daughter had been Multnomah, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't know anything about this legend. I didn't know Multnomah was named for the chief's daughter. It was just pretty amazing. And I believe it was smallpox that the tribe had contracted at that time. So it just was really a big deal to be able to hear my guide so clearly and bit by bit to be able to put those pieces together. So I had a lot of gratitude to my daughter for her courage and her strength in doing that. And a few weeks later, I went to an event where an intuitive artist drew me in a past life, and she actually had this sketchbook of all these sketches. She didn't know who they were of, but she invited us all to look through it. And the minute I saw her sketchbook that was closed up, I could hear the drums again, and I could hear my daughter's name, and I could hear Princess Multnomah Falls. And so when it was my turn, I looked in the book and I found a sketch of her right away that was in there. So that was pretty amazing. So there just were a lot of confirmations and validations because it was a lot to accept. And you're kind of thinking, am I just, falling for this, gift shoppy, packaging of a nice story, a nice legend. But for me, it's true. I truly believe that legend and just felt so much energy around it. I also was shown that my daughter did not suffer in any way. She was pulled out of her body by angels the minute she stepped off the falls. So there was no suffering involved. And the tribe did find her body at the base of the waterfalls the next morning. And as I said, the sickness was suddenly gone. So amazing story there. But that's Multnomah Falls, and an absolutely gorgeous waterfall in every season, as you can see. So let's look at the next slide. And I made a really interesting road trip again with two friends. And these trips started coming up because I was hearing about, friends flying to Europe and, kind of, Greg, like your stories, because, some of them were air travel type stories. And I just wasn't in a position at that time to be able to make any flights, single mom, two kids, etc. And I just did not have the funds or the vacation time. So I turned things around and I asked my guides, and I had said, if there's any past life energy that you really want me to release that's local, that involves a past life pilgrimage locally, I'm open, just tell me where to go. And that's when these trips started coming up. So it was interesting. I just had to open to it. So this trip was a long day trip. We went on a Wednesday because that was the one and only day of the week that the native tribe, the Quileute, out in Forks and La Push, Washington, all the way on the West Coast, the Olympic coast of Washington State. That was the 1 day a week that they did their ceremony and did their tribal dinner, which was open to the public. That is really rare. That is a big privilege. And I had heard about it from friends, and I knew it was on a Wednesday. So we did this long day trip on a Wednesday. You've got to take the ferry over and drive the whole way across the peninsula, but we did it. And three of us went. Three of us were drawn to do this trip. We were drawn to do it together and decided to go together. And I knew we were supposed to go to the beach, but I didn't realize until about a week before. I thought, okay, I need to do a bit more research and, meditate and pray and ask my guides, where do you want us to go? Where on the beach? Because I'm still thinking there's one beach. Well, guess what? There's 4 beaches. There's Rialto Beach, which is Washington State, and then beaches 1, 2, and 3, which are the next 3 photos. Those are in Native American land and territory. But again, you are allowed to go to them, which is a generous sharing of that land. And I asked my friends and said, okay, I don't want to influence each other. Here's the description from, whatever source I found online. Here's the description of the 4 beaches. Which one are you drawn to? Well, didn't we pick 3 different beaches? And I'm now thinking, oh, great, this is mission impossible. There's just like not enough time in the day, no matter how early we leave in the morning, because we've got to catch the ferry and, get over there. And it's hundreds of miles to drive over there. And we're not staying overnight. And we've got to get on the last ferry back home, like at 11 o'clock at night. But anyway, we were like, okay, we need to trust. Let's do a little bit more research. So it turned out 2 of the beaches were fairly close to the road, really quite close to the main road. And the 3rd beach, beach 2, was a couple mile hike. And the other beach was really far. It was like a 6 or 7 mile hike. So we're like, okay, this is perfect. Because I was drawn to one friend was drawn to Rialto, and I was drawn to beach 1, the second photo, and one was drawn to beach 2, where we had to make the hike in. But we went to those 3 places and had the most incredible experiences. And 2 of us had been in a past life together, where I had been a Quileute medicine woman, and my friend, my former boyfriend, had been a young Native American brave in that lifetime. And he was in his teens. And what happened was, and we all saw this as we got there on the beach, we could see, it was like time just rolled back, and we could see this old European ship going down. We could see it was just going down in front of our eyes. And what had happened was, I had been there on the beach, but I couldn't possibly man the canoe. We had this huge canoe that's meant to have 20, 30 people. It's meant to move a large group of people. It's the one and only canoe that our tribe had. And so this young brave, because he's young, he's fast, he races on down to the beach, and he jumps into the canoe and starts to head out. And I'm just yelling at him, don't do it. You've got to wait for the others, because they can't be manned by one person. But he's just absolutely showboating, as well as he wants to help this ship that's going down. But he just needed to wait literally another 60 seconds, 90 seconds, because other men were like running for the beach. So what I get to witness is him, he can't handle it in the waters. It's the shipwreck coast, and he can't handle it in the waters alone. And he turns over the canoe. So he drowns in front of my eyes, in front of everybody's eyes, and we're all helpless on the shore, and we can't get to any of them and can't save any of the men who went down in the ship either. So here I am witnessing another drowning, multiple drownings that I just cannot prevent. So I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive him, because we did have some anger between us, because, I'm the elder, I'm the medicine woman, and I'm just yelling at him, stop, wait. And he just won't listen. So that was some tough energy. But these beaches were just absolutely amazing, just so pristine. And I took my shoes and socks off on one of them. Rialto Beach is very rocky, lots of big trees on it. But there were places on beach one where it was just this pure, beautiful white sand like you don't normally get on the Washington or Oregon coast. So I took my shoes and socks off. And the minute I started wading into the water, I could hear my name being called. And I thought, why am I hearing this name I haven't heard before? But I knew it was my name. And my former boyfriend stepped in behind me because he'd been off exploring in a different area. We'd all split up on that beach too at a certain point. And I knew then that he had been a sea captain husband of mine in another past life. And now I knew the names. And then I was able to do the research on it. And I was able to find his will. I was able to find out all kinds of information because it was in the 1800s. So it wasn't that long ago. So that was really neat too, to have like another past life information come through like that. So we just had the most incredible day. I can't believe how many miles we went and how many adventures we had all in one day. And we got on that last ferry like clockwork. It was just all perfect. So that was the big road trip. And these are the beaches that were filmed in Twilight, in the Twilight movie series. So this is where the tribes were. So that's what that trip was about, and that lesson of forgiveness. So let's look at the next slide. So this is now the sea captain wife life that I found, and that was the name that I was hearing. I kept hearing my guides whispering. Actually, it got louder, kind of like shouting, Eliza, Eliza Ann. And I'm like, okay, I know that's me, but I haven't heard myself called that before, or not for a long time. And then they actually said Weber. And from saying that, I had the full name. So I was able to piece together a lot more information regarding this life it was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And as I mentioned, my husband was a sea captain and we lived right by the water. How perfect. Of course we did. And I was able to Google Earth it, and the house doesn't stand anymore, but I was able to pick out what I believe was our lot. So this is on my list of places I want to go to because I've only been able to Google Earth it. Interestingly, I have been to Nova Scotia, but I did not know about this life at that time, so I wasn't able to look into it. And the reason the lesson for that lifetime was courage. It not only takes a lot of courage to be either a sea captain or to be a sea captain's wife, because guess what? Your husband, father of your children, is leaving a lot. You are on your own a lot. And you do not know if he's coming home from any voyage, because it was a very dangerous occupation. And we had a very large family. I kind of laugh about it now. That took a lot of courage too, because it was 9 children. And I also became involved with the Underground Railroad. And I was helping run the Underground Railroad through our home. So I thought that was a really, really interesting choice too. And I didn't think to include the photo, but some of the proof of that lifetime, because again, this just, all sounds so out there and so surprising, but I was able to purchase this amazing big china closet. It stands 9'4". So it's got to have a 10-foot ceiling. It's got to have a high ceiling to even fit in the room. And I purchased it in a really unusual way with this inheritance from my grandmother. And when I was in the store, and I couldn't believe it, because I'm not normally this pushy, and it was priced about $3,000 over what I had. And I literally had the check from my grandmother for $5,000. And the salesman came up to me because he could see my husband and I were really looking at it. And I just looked him straight in the eye and I said, "Is the owner here?" And he said, "Yes." And he took me to the owner. I asked him a few questions about the piece, and I could see the piece was way too big for the store. And it was just so beautiful and so ornate. I thought they might be having some trouble moving that piece because it's really big. It's going to take a special, home to be able to house this piece. And so I went in and talked to the owner, and I could just hear my guide saying, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. And I told him, and I just said, I don't have the budget for this beautiful piece. Would you be willing to accept $5,000 for it today on the spot? I will purchase it from you right now. And I took the check out. And he really gulped, and he's like, oh my gosh, this was a custom order piece. And I'd already learned from the salesman that the person had then reneged on the sale of it and then didn't accept delivery. So he's now stuck with this huge china closet from Europe, which I'm sure cost a pretty penny to ship over from Europe. But he looked at me, and I just was not going to change my mind. That was my budget. And I'd kind of told my husband, don't make eye contact, don't look at him. He's going to be like, are we going to get, more budget from the husband? And so in fact, I think I didn't even have him in the room with me. And I was able to purchase the piece, but I believe that china closet was mine in that past life when I was the sea captain's wife. And my former boyfriend was that husband in the 1800s. And the first time he came to my home, my current home, he saw that piece. He could not take his eyes off it. He must have stood there with his hand on it for about 10 minutes and wanted to know everything about how I got it, where I got it, how I found it. And I remembered, oh my gosh, you brought this over for me from Europe before, at that time, to Halifax. So to have this physical piece, still exist is pretty interesting. In fact, I'll look for a photo and I'll link it in our comments for today. But that was just, it really was a pretty amazing past life. And as I said, I need to, get myself back up there, because how cool to have a physical tie into it too, and to have had, part of it come through when I'm in this unrelated life, but again, by the water, because I seem to be by the water a lot. Those seem to be really meaningful lives to me that I can remember and remember well. So let's look at the next slide. So here I am back by the water again. And I've actually published a book called The Flow One Plymouth Plantation because I just have so many memories of being in colonial America at Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts. And what a treasure it is, because there's the Living History Museum that's there to commemorate what it was like back in the 1620s when we first, came over from Europe. And it was very interesting to go to that living museum, because I'd actually lived in Boston I went there straight after college. So I was there from 1982 to 1993. I lived in the Boston area. So I'd been to Plymouth Plantation. It was a great place to take visitors from out of town. But I wasn't awake at that time. But I had a really interesting experience. And when I went on the Mayflower replica, the ship, it's docked there in the harbor. I've never had a panic attack in my life, but I got so claustrophobic and I was just sweating bullets. And I thought, I've got to get out of here. So I had just, told family or friends or whoever I was with, I'll be outside. You can meet me outside, because I could not stand it inside that ship. And it was like heaving. And I mean, it's calm as can be. This ship is not moving. It's me having that past life bubbling up and remembering that voyage over from outside of London in those months at sea. And so when I went back more recently to Plymouth Plantation a couple of years ago, I knew who I'd been. I knew I had been Anne Warren. Richard Warren had come over on 1620 on the original Mayflower ship. And then it was mostly men on the original voyage, because they had no idea what they were going to. And they had to build housing and get crops started. So it wasn't considered, quote, safe for women and children. So there weren't that many women and children on the original voyage. But my father sent for us in 1623. So my stepmother and my four sisters and I came over in 1623. And so I go to Plymouth Plantation, and I don't know what, I knew that there were, a small number of houses to be kind of representative of what had been there. And I just got there and I was like, okay, if I really lived here, show me which was my home. Where would I have lived? Is it, even represented here? Because it's a recreation, it's a museum, it's a living museum. It's a couple miles from where the original location was, but the energy's very much there. And I heard clear as day, last one on the left. It's the closest to the water. So I thought, okay, that's what my guides want to say. That's fine. We'll just see how today goes. The houses are not labeled. There's nothing marking which one is which. But I went through each one of them just to kind of experience it. And I got into the first one on the right, that's the closest up to the garrison house and up to where you would have gone into the fort for safety, and it was for town meetings. I mean, it was a multi-purpose building. It was our only large building. I went into that first house on the right, and I was so ticked off. I'm like, oh, I can't stand this little building, this little home. And so I'm just waiting and I'm listening. And the museum workers, they're in character. I mean, they will only speak to you in the year that it was. They will not go out of character. So I finally said to them, may I ask whose home this is? And they said, oh, well, this is the home of Captain Miles Standish. And I got such a chill down my back. I was like, oh, that's it. Because we did not get along in that lifetime. And it was really interesting that I could just, pick up on that again. So anyway, I go through each of the homes, and I get down to the last one on the left, closest to the water, and there was no one there. It was very interesting because this is, you can get crowded in these little homes, and it's a popular place, but there was no one there but me. And I went into the home. And I'm looking around, and again, they're not labeled of who lived there. And I was like, this is it. This is it. It may not look exactly the same, but I just know this energy. And I went out in the gardens because each family was able to have their own private garden after a few years. They decided to do that. And it wasn't just crops grown in common. And I asked one of the museum employees, and I said, may I ask whose home this is? Who lives in this home? And they looked at me and they said, why, of course, it's the Warren family. And it's like, there it is. There it is. So it was just so interesting. So it really was magical to be able to go back there, because who gets to do that, to get the privilege of doing that. And it was very interesting because, Gregg, I, like you, I got an absolutely free plane ticket because I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's a long way from Seattle to Boston to go out to Plymouth Plantation. But again, I just had to get out of my own way. And I just said to my guides, I know you really want me to go there. Show me the way. Make it easy. Please help me. And all of a sudden, a few days later, I get this email in my junk mail, and luckily see it because they wanted me to. And it was something from, I think it was Delta Airlines, saying, do you know you have miles that are about to expire and you have enough for a plane ticket? And I'm like, what? I totally lost track of that. Did not know that. And I'm like, great, I can go see my dad in Quebec. I won't have to buy a ticket, so I can go do my annual visit to him. I could not get that free ticket to route to Quebec, to Montreal, to like anywhere really near him. And so I finally had called the airline because I just couldn't get it to route myself, close enough to his house. And they kept saying, you need to go to Boston. You need to fly Seattle to Boston. And I'm like, Boston. And it took me a couple of times to realize, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go spend a couple of days out at Plymouth Plantation on my own and just, really be back in that energy. So that's what I did. And it was a big lesson in forgiving the sea captain who'd brought me over, because I thought in that lifetime that we were supposed to marry. And I thought that that was, the intended outcome of that lifetime. And I just was not forgiving him. So again, check out the book. We'll link it for fun. It's called The Flow One Plymouth Plantation. But that was a pretty magical trip to go back and get to go to that living museum at Plymouth Plantation. So again, with the beautiful, wonderful free ticket.
Yeah.
So let's look at the next slide. And this was amazing to me, because again, you can say, wow, that's so fanciful. She thinks she was at Plymouth Plantation. Maybe she's just a history buff. And sure, that can all be true, but just there's so much information and so many validation points that came up, including the sketch on the left is me in that lifetime. And I sat down with my friend Lori Regan, who I went on several of the past life pilgrimages with. We did the Ramona Falls and we did the Rialto and beaches 1 through 3 out on the Olympic Peninsula. But she had drawn me. This was the very first time we met. She drew this little sketch of me on the left. And she knew nothing about me. She didn't want to know anything about me. And the reason she draws these sketches, these simple sketches, is to help people release energy. And it's a beautiful gift. And the minute I saw that sketch, I knew it was me at Plymouth. And she was able to do a little mini reading. Again, I told her nothing. And she was able to confirm, and she says, it feels like you in the 1600s. I'm not taking the time to draw the colonial gear because I'm hearing you know who you were. And I've got a long line of people here waiting. So forgive me, I'm not going to draw that part. I said, this is enough. I'm just amazed. I'm so grateful, because again, it was helping me release that energy as Anne Morin Little. Because what a privilege to get to have a sketch of yourself from the 1600s. Because we were not wealthy. We were not going to have an oil painting. There was no photography. There was no sketch that had survived. So it just was a big deal. Even more amazingly, so I just meet Lori for a few hours and I think, I'll probably never meet this gal again. It was, a friend had taken me to this party, this love and light party, to have this past life sketch done. And that was where I also got the one of my daughter as Multnomah, from Multnomah Falls. What was even more amazing, so now I'm not sitting with Lori. Again, I have no idea if we're ever going to meet again. It just was a really interesting experience. I let it go. But I did friend her on Facebook, and I saw that she posted some sketches on Facebook. So I didn't really think much more about it. But a few days later, after I met her, I got on Facebook, and the first thing that came up was this sketch, the second sketch, a woman named Abby Metcalf. And I just burst into tears when I saw it, because here was my best friend from Plymouth, who's a friend in my life again now. So I didn't say a thing to my friend, because I thought, am I just being a nut? Am I just being fanciful? So I just send it as a text to my friend and say, do you know who this is? Here, look at this sketch. I don't say it's a past life sketch. I don't say how I got it. And my friend says, oh my God, that was me in the 1600s. I think I know you in colonial America. And she just starts spouting the same past life. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So she recognized the sketch of herself. And then again, the same thing happens a couple days later. And Lori draws the gentleman that I knew was Captain William Pierce. And Lori was told with that one by her guides, many people will recognize this man and may ask for this sketch from you, but it's only to go to the person who can solve the clue. The clue you're to give, and this is all you're to say, is who was Wayne to this man? Wayne is not his name. Who was Wayne to this man? So I sat and meditated and asked my guides and said, isn't this Captain William Pierce who brought me over? to Plymouth Plantation? And they said, absolutely. So I asked my guides in meditation, who was Wayne? They said, Wayne was his brother. He was also a sea captain. So I sent that to Lori and she said, that's exactly right. The sketch is yours. So that's how that one came through, which I thought was incredible. And again, I put it on my phone. I don't say anything to anybody about where I got it or that I believed it was a past life sketch. I showed it to people who knew my former boyfriend from this lifetime that woke me up spiritually, who had been William Pierce. And I just said, do you recognize this sketch? I think a dozen different people said to me, oh my gosh, and they named him. And they said, who sketched him? That's a really good likeness. And then I said to him, well, guess what? He looks an awful lot like he did in the 1600s. So that was really interesting. And then the final sketch came through from Lori. Again, she's just putting these on Facebook mixed in with all these other sketches. She said she's never drawn a series like this for one person, but I just had so much energy caught up in that lifetime that I hadn't been able to let go of, that she drew this whole sketch. So this last one, I mean, he looks like a pilgrim. You can kind of tell by the clothing, and he just looks more like a recognizable pilgrim. And the only clue that she gave me, she said, because I said, I think I know that man. And she said, my guide said, father. And I'm like, father? Was he my father? Was that a term used in that lifetime? It took me a few minutes to get it. It's my former husband. It's the father of my children in this lifetime. And he was also in that life at Plymouth Plantation. So it just, again, this was just amazing to have this whole series come through. So that's kind of a summary of some of the details of that past life and what came out of that pilgrimage. So let's look at the next slide. So this is interesting. This is one of my favorite lifetimes. I would call it a reward lifetime or a rest life. And I was a married female writer named Gretchen Elliott, and it was 1800s. And we did not have children. I was married to a fellow writer, and we were in Oregon country. It's now Othello, Washington. But he and I, my husband from that lifetime, he and I made a past life pilgrimage to Othello. And we weren't sure where to start, how to research that lifetime, but we thought, gosh, this is recent enough. Maybe we could find our graves. That would be interesting. So I researched cemeteries in that area, and we went to the Besshampton Memorial Gardens. But the minute we started to pull into it, and we had a lot of trouble finding it. I'm driving my SUV, and I just keep looping around. We can like see it, but we can't get to it. Like the GPS just can't find it. And we're like trying to work our way around. So I finally circled for like the third time. And I said, I know it's down this road. It's down this little, it's literally a cow path. And he looks at me, he's like, you can't drive on that. I was like, yes, I can. Watch me. I'll go really slow. And he's just looking at me like, you don't normally do things like that. But I was like, this is the way. This is how we're going to get to the cemetery. So we bumped our way, I'm sure on private land, along this cow path that bordered this cemetery. And we get to the cemetery, and then my heart kind of sinks when we get to it because I see the sign as we're going in. It's established. It's a recent cemetery. It's established, what, 1960? I'm like, oh, we're not buried here from the 1800s. This isn't it. So we split up in the cemetery, and I just go around to see, well, my guides went to a lot of trouble to get me here. So let's see why. So I'm walking around looking at the different markers and reading them. And there was no person working at the cemetery there. So he's working the reader board, and he's calling the different people to try and reach someone to say, are there other cemeteries locally and that sort of thing. But I'm standing there and I'm like, why are we here? Why did we come down that cow path? And we're just melting. It's like 100+ degrees out. It's August and we're just melting. And I'm just standing there like, why are we here? And I keep looking at the cow path we drove down and I could hear an owl hooting. And I'm like, why am I hearing an owl? That represents wisdom to me. And so I'm going around in these different trees you can see, trying to find the owl. And all that does is it sends me back to look at that cow path we drove along. And I'm asking my guides, why? Why are you showing me this? And they finally said, we're showing you your farm. You just drove down your own cow path. This was all a cornfield, and there was corn there coming in. And it's like, oh my gosh. So we couldn't find, the farmhouse was long gone of where we lived, but I would never have found that actual location except my guides, kind of navigated me in by the cemetery. So yeah, that was a story of finding that. And we just had a lot of other adventures that day, but I know we're getting long-winded today, so I want to move on to the next slide. But it was another just beautiful, amazing past life pilgrimage, and I've been able to go back to it. Mount Shasta, California, very interesting place. It's considered to be, Gregg mentioned chakras for the earth earlier, and it's considered to be the root chakra for the earth. And it's exactly 555 miles from my home, door to door. I've been there twice. And there is a lot of ET activity. They call it lenticular clouds, and there's all these reasons scientists can give you of why these certain types of clouds are above Mount Shasta, which is an active volcano. But hello, have you seen a ship before? It's just the perfect cover for a ship. And I really believe that's, how the ships move about. And if they choose to show themselves to you, I think it's a privilege. I mean, I've gotten some pictures of them there, and I think it's a privilege. And other people are, lenticular clouds. That's fine. We all have our different belief systems. I found multiple Native American past lives when I went to Mount Shasta, which was amazing. And I also found a past life in Lemuria. Lemuria was it balances out Gregg talking about Atlantis. Lemuria was another advanced civilization that also went down. There was a war between Atlantis and Lemuria. And we went on a full day. I went down with friends for the week the first time, and we stayed in this beautiful place called the Angel House and rented this home. And we went on a one-day tour with a tour guide, two of us did. And she took us to a certain place where we were able to go inside, and through meditation, we were able to go to Telos, which was the city from Lemuria that is now inside Mount Shasta. That's what's left of the civilization. And I saw this vivid past life as a preschool teacher, and Lori had already drawn me in it, but I hadn't known where it was until I got there. And then I learned my name. And I just had this vision of me standing up in front of this classroom. There's all these adorable little kids looking at me, these preschoolers. They're mostly 2, 3, 4 years old. But it's like a Star Trek moment because they're from all these different galaxies and nations and star children. And I'm looking at them thinking, oh my gosh, how do I teach them? Because we all speak different languages. And my guides took pity on me because I'm up there fumbling around with like a whiteboard and a chalkboard going, oh my gosh, I need help. And they said, just use your telepathy. You're here to give them a refresher on telepathy because they've recently moved into these bodies that they're in, and they just need a refresher how to use their telepathy now that they're in a body. And we also did a class on astral travel and how to safely leave their body and come back to their body. So how's that for a preschool curriculum? Telepathy and astral travel. So Mount Shasta, very magical place. If you're called to it, wonderful, fantastic. Go there, but make sure you're really, really well grounded. I have a lot of trouble staying grounded there. So I lose every grounding stone I take with me every time I'm there and have to buy all new ones. It's just a magical place, but really, really high energy, a lot going on. So let's take a look at the next slide. Many other adventures there, but again, in interests of time. Now here was a flight. I knew I was meant to go to Glastonbury. My guides had been telling me for years. I think it was about 5 years before I went in July of 2019, and kept telling me, you need to go to Glastonbury. You need the healing. It's very important for you to go. And I wasn't sure what lives it correlated to. But I did go. It came up actually through a writers' conference. I went to this incredible writers' conference in Edinburgh, Scotland. And then I added on, which was for a week. And I added on another week to go to London and to go to Glastonbury before going up to Edinburgh. And this photo is of the Chalice Well Gardens, which are just a magical place. And amazingly, there's all these springs. There's the red spring and the white spring. And amazingly, you're allowed to walk in them and step in them, which I just find mind-blowing. That's like not a US thing that they let you do. Everything beautiful is, no, don't touch this and don't step in that. But there I was able to step into it. And again, it was very, very crowded, but all of a sudden everyone was just gone. I'm with my tour guide. He's just meditating, sitting on a bench. And he said, you're supposed to have your own experience. And did you know you can step in the water? And this isn't the picture of the water I went in. It was a different part, but there were many different places where you could access the spring. And I said, oh, absolutely. So I rolled up my pants because I wasn't sure. He said, it's fairly deep. So I rolled up my pants above my knee and stepped in. He said, it's also really cold. So, don't stay in there too long. And I'm like, hey, I'm from Quebec. I can do cold water. So I stepped in, and yes, it was absolutely frigid. But it felt so good on that hot summer day. And I just walked the length of this long, beautiful pool of water. And I stayed in there for about 5 minutes until my teeth were just chattering. And it's like, I better get out of here while I can still, walk steadily to not fall down in this. So I got out at the other end of it, and I just went and sat on the bench away from my guide. And again, the other people had just all kind of dissipated. There weren't many around, which was wonderful. And I'm leaning over to start drying my legs and feet to put my shoes and socks back on. And all of a sudden, I just get this amazing, immense tremor. My left leg and foot is just like shaking and shaking and shaking. And I didn't even try to fight it because my guides were like, we need to heal this for you. We've got to heal this for you. Just let the energy do its thing. I thought it was an earthquake. I literally looked around thinking, oh, wow, we're having an earthquake. Why doesn't anybody else feel it? And I'm like, oh, why is the earthquake only my left leg? So it was this tremendous healing of when my leg had been blown off in World War II. And that's why they had wanted me to go there, because I've never energetically had it back since then. And it was making it really hard for me to walk well. It was making it hard for me to receive, because we give through the right side and we receive through the left side. And it also, Glastonbury was this incredible intersection of not only that surprise World War II past life, which didn't take place there, it was in Germany, but energy goes where it needs to go. But it was the intersection of my lifetimes when I was Mary Magdalene and also when I was Queen Guinevere. So to have that all in one place, it's just an incredible, incredible place. And sure, you've got to overlook the touristy pieces now because it's like this new age gone mad kind of thing crossed with 1960 hippies who've never left. But you can find your peace there. You can find your special places there. It's just very amazing. And I think that's the last slide, Gregg. So let's just wrap up. My wrap up is follow your heart. Just go where you're meant to go. And yes, sometimes you go via meditation or astral travel. Sometimes you go to like a local location and just see it with fresh eyes. Because, for instance, you can go to a local museum, like Seattle has a wonderful Gold Rush Museum, Klondike Gold Rush Museum, and it holds the energy of California, of Oregon, of Washington, of Alaska. I mean, it's, it can bring in a lot of that energy for you when you do that. Or you may be going somewhere further afar, and don't worry if you can't find out via Google exactly which beach you're supposed to go to, or exactly can I get to that 0 point, like Gregg didn't know. It just matters that we make the effort and that we listen and go where we're guided to go. That's my conclusion.
Yes, I agree.
How about you, Gregg?
Yeah, just follow your intuition. Don't ignore it. Don't put it down. Go with your gut on all this stuff. That's what I did. And a lot of this information comes in, and the first thing you react is, that's impossible. How am I ever going to get there? Or this isn't real, But with me, when those feelings keep coming back and start nagging you,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why, but I left myself open to other possibilities being there for me. So, I didn't have the funds or the wherewithal to go to Paris, but boom, lo and behold,
Hotel points.
all the doors flew open. So
right.
So you just got to stay with it and don't be your own obstacle,
Yes, that's so important, because because we're socialized to have that, left brain, that skepticism, and there's a difference. Be discerning, meaning just keep your heart open. And yes, you use your good brain and logic. So what I do a lot of times is I'll just ask my guides, show me more, tell me more. And if I'm on the right track, the proof just comes and comes and comes. And I really appreciate those validations, because it makes my left brain just chill out, and I can be more in my heart and more listen to my intuition, and just keep my ego balanced.
Yep, for sure. Well, we've gone a little long today, so it's a good time to wrap up here.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And please join us again the second and fourth Friday of the month at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I want to wish everyone a very, very happy New Year's. We move into some new adventures. And you can join us on our wakingupspiritually.com website. And you can see past episodes and programs on there too. And we always love your suggestions. What's on your mind? What would be a good topic for you? So let us know that too. And you're welcome to visit my website at wendyrosewilliams.com. And you can request a complimentary 15-minute phone appointment with me to explore doing a past life regression or session together. And Gregg, how can people reach you?
Come check me out at greggkirk.com, GREGGKIRK. And check out the events link for online group healing sessions or a personal session. Just reach out to me through the contact link. So happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you all in the new year. Bye-bye.